Hi everyone, this is Daniel. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's really close and dear to my heart, and that's gardening and starting plants from seed. My love for gardening started when I was pretty young. I grew up on a farm in North Dakota, and some of my earliest memories are helping my grandfather in his garden, both planting, taking care of the plants, and then harvesting the fruits of our labor. And at about age 10, that's when I started gardening myself. I actually set up a garden in my parents' backyard. And then fast forward many years, once I got out of my schooling and my education, I started having gardens at like a community garden center when I lived in an apartment and a condo. And then since living in my own house, I've had a garden in our backyard here in Denver for the last 5 years. Now, I've lived in a lot of different locations, and the one thing I noticed when I moved to Denver is that when I would walk into a garden center or walk into a big box store, yes, they had plants already ready to plant, but they really did lack a lot of diversity and a lot of variety. If I wanted a tomato plant, they had maybe 4 different options. If I wanted a pepper plant, maybe 3 or 4, if I was lucky, 5 options. And if you wanted to plant an eggplant, you had 1 option. So needless to say, I kind of realized pretty quickly I needed to do something different if I wanted to have the variety of produce that I had been accustomed to. And that's when I started planting my own seeds to produce my own transplants for later in the spring. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk through my process of how I do that and just give you kind of an idea of what I'm working with this year. So the first thing you're going to have to start off with is a seed soil or seed starting media. You can purchase this at any big box store or a garden center. You can also make your own if you want to follow instructions that you can find online or in YouTube. The next thing you need is something to actually start the plants in. I like to use these plastic seed starting trays, and you can purchase these at usually a garden center. Sometimes you can find them at a big box store, but not very often. The one thing I would like to point out is they have little holes on the bottom, which allows the water to drain out. And that's going to be important when you're taking care of your plants. Because you have the holes at the bottom, you need some type of a plant tray to actually keep them in. And you can either buy the standard version, which is rather flimsy. It will do the job, but they don't hold up very well. So you may want to spring for the more expensive version. And this is just a more durable, thicker seed tray. And the reason why I like these trays is because they are more durable, you're able to bring your plants inside and outside, or bring them outdoors, or bring them inside, or bring them into the garage, whatever you need to do once it starts getting warm, but it's not warm enough to keep the plants outside 24/7. That's why I like these more sturdy trays. The next thing you will need, of course, is going to be your seeds themselves. And today what we're going to plant is we've got peppers, we have tomatoes, and we have eggplants. So we're going to plant all of these different varieties today. Another thing you will need is either some old newspaper or some advertisements from the grocery store because this process will get a little dirty and a little messy. So we want to try to help contain all of that mess the best that we can. And then the last thing you need is something to record all of this information in. You know, I've been in Denver now for a little over 5 years, and every year I'm gardening, I learn a little bit more. And what I like to record is I record when I plant my plants or plant the seeds, when I actually transplant my seedlings into the garden. I like to record how well they did, what the weather was during the summer, when they started to flower, how much fruit they produced, and really how the overall season went. And what that information provides me is at the end of the year, I can then go through my little gardening diary or gardening journal, and it allows me to figure out which varieties do I want to plant again next year, and which ones do I want to maybe discontinue so I have room in my garden to try something new. And that's one of the cool things about gardening is really a lot of experimentation, not only looking at what your weather patterns are, but what your zone is for your freeze and frost cycle, looking at how much rain you get, sunshine. Here in Denver, we're up a mile up in altitude, so we deal with different things compared to people who live at lower elevations. And then also depending on the length of your growing season. And what works for someone in Texas probably isn't going to work for someone in Maine, as is someone who lives in Nebraska. It's probably not going to work up here in Denver. So everyone's got to kind of, through trial and error, figure out what works best for them. So here I'm just going to show you a few of the things that we've already got going here at our house. We've got artichoke. And the artichoke, we grow them actually not for the artichoke bud itself, but we grow them for the flowers because they're really pretty. And we already have some tomatoes going, and we also have some broccoli going, which I'm going to plant outside here in the next couple weeks. Now, one thing I would like to point out is I start all of my seeds in these plastic seed starting trays. And once the plants get larger, I then transplant them into larger individual containers. And if the plant gets bigger yet again, which a lot of my tomato plants will, I'll plant them into even a larger container. I keep upplanting them until it's time to plant them outside. I prefer this method because for me, this works the best. Plus, I can reuse these pots several times before I have to replace them. There are other options available. You can use compost pots. You can use like these pots that are made out of compressed peat moss. They've got pots that you can make out of homemade materials like toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls. You can use newspaper, stuff like that. All of those can work for you, but in my hands, I'm not a fan of them because they just aren't as durable and they're a lot more difficult to handle. So in my household, I like to use the plastic seed starting trays, and then I move all my plants up into larger plastic pots, and if needed, I make them even a little bit larger. So now what we'll do is we're going to get our process started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some water to our seed starting soil or our seed starting media to get this moist or damp to begin with. And then we're going to go outside and we're actually going to compact that seed starting media into our trays here. And the reason why we're going to do it outside is when you fill up the tray, that's the messiest part of the whole process. And I have learned from experience, we need to do that outside. Otherwise, we create a really big mess in the house. So let's go outside and we're going to go put the soil into our seed starting tray. Look at the soil. I want you to look at the soil. So what we've done here, we've taken our potting soil or seed starting soil that we bought at a big box store. We placed it into a container that has no holes. We then added water to dampen the soil. So now once the soil is charged with water, you can now load it into the individual trays or individual cells. All you need to do, just add it in there, kind of pack it in. As you can see, we are outdoors when we're doing this because we don't want to get any dirt in the house.
Yeah. We just had snow like 2 days ago.
So you probably can't hear Yabo in the background there, but we did have snow earlier this week. We had 11.5 inches here in Denver back on Wednesday evening into Thursday. But since then, it's warmed up a little bit, and most of the snow has melted in the areas where we have sunshine, but in our backyard, we do still have snow because we have a fence, and that shades everything out along the fence.
Oh, by the way, we live in Denver.
I think they already know that, but yeah. If not, they do know. So what I like to do is I just add the soil in, I pack it down with my fingers. Yabo can maybe get in here for a closer close-up. And I just pack it down. And I like to do it over the container for potting soil, or the seed starting soil. That way any of the excess can go down back in there. And of course, it's not all that warm out today, so my fingers are already cold because it is freezing out here, but just one of the many reasons why we're starting our plants early, so that when the weather does get nice here in the Mile High City, we can hit the ground running and get our plants a head start. And I think now what we'll do is we'll just fast forward to when this is completely full. Okay, so now we're going to fast forward quite a bit. We've now placed our seed starting media into all of our cells. As you can see, and we'll zoom in here, you can see that everything is nicely full to the brim, but not too full. And you will notice a color difference between the seed starting medium that was pre-moistened, and then at the end we had to actually add a little bit of the stuff fresh out of the bag. So there is a little bit of a color difference. In the long run, that really won't matter because it will also get moistened with some water here in just a few minutes. But now we will retreat to the indoors where we'll actually plant our seeds, where it's a lot warmer than outside in the cold tundra of the Mile High City. Okay, now we've completed our Okay, now we've moved back indoors and we're now ready to plant our seeds. So to give you an idea of what we're planting here in our household, we'll just kind of go through. We've got several different types of eggplant, tomatoes, and peppers, and we'll go through the different types that we're going with today. So our first one is a long purple eggplant. We've got one from Taiwan, which is the eggplant ping tung. And we also have a multicolored eggplant, which is the Erdine purple striped. As for tomatoes, we like to plant both larger tomatoes and we also plant smaller cherry or grape tomatoes. So for larger tomatoes, we have Roma tomatoes. One of my favorite, which is Mortgage Lifter. We're trying a new one here, which is Beefsteak. I know lots of people have this. I've seen this at big box stores a lot. And the other tomato that we're trying is a giant pink Belgium. Again, heard great things about this one, so we're hoping that this one does well for us. As for tomatoes, we are going with the dark cherry or a black cherry. These are great tomatoes. They start off early in the year and they just keep trucking all year long, and they grow like weeds. You'll have lots of tomatoes. Our next one here is a pink bumblebee. It's really great for kids. It's great to bring to parties because with the coloration, they're just really special looking tomatoes. My absolute favorite cherry tomato that we have is the Atomic Grape Tomato. These are phenomenal tomatoes. The flavor of them, the color of them, everything about this tomato is phenomenal. I would not grow this as your first tomato, and the reason why is because of the coloration, it doesn't turn red. There isn't a good indicator to say, oh hey, look at me, pick me, I'm ripe. So if you're a novice, you may end up letting these sit on the vine too long, and then by the time you actually pick them, they're overripe and then they'll spoil pretty quickly. But again, great tomato. They just require a little more diligence in checking them. And then the one that we're trying this year for grape tomatoes is the yellow pear tomato. As for peppers, we like both sweet peppers and we like our spicy peppers. As for our spicy peppers, we've got the Sugar Rush Peach pepper. It's kind of a cross between both a sweet pepper and a hot pepper. Starts off very sweet and crisp, and then boom, it hits you. Great pepper. Our next pepper is a Serrano pepper. We cook a lot with Serranos here in our family. We're also growing Anaheim peppers, which are very similar to poblano peppers. We're also growing Anaheim peppers. And then our last one here are red Thai chili peppers. These are the little small short red ones that you'll find. Very spicy. In our family, we grow it, number one, because the plant is really pretty when you have all the peppers on it. But then we also will pick the red peppers or the ripe peppers and dehydrate them and then use those for cooking. As for sweet peppers, we are growing the red Marconi, which is an Italian pepper. We have the banana pepper. We have bell peppers, basically a carnival blend, so who knows what type of color we're going to get this year. And then our all-time favorite sweet pepper, which is a shishito pepper. We use this a lot. We have probably, a dozen plants ourselves, and then this is one that I will start and I will give to pretty much all of our friends and family. Everyone in the neighborhood gets one because this is a great pepper. Once it starts producing around Independence Day, it keeps producing all the way until it freezes. So it's a great pepper. It's very versatile. Our favorite method is to actually stir fry these peppers. So now what we'll do is we'll actually do our planting. What I like to use is I use a plastic chopstick because I can clean this and disinfect it. And what you'll want to do is take the end of the chopstick and actually make a little hole to place your seed. Now the depth of the hole is depending upon what your seed type is. All of the seed packets will say a recommended planting depth. And in general, the rule of thumb is you want to plant a seed 3 to 4 times deeper than what the diameter of the seed is. So for eggplants, peppers, and tomatoes, that's roughly a 1/4 inch deep. And the reason why I put 2 holes in here is I want to make sure that I have at least 1 healthy plant per cell once everything germinates. Now, if I have a really large greenhouse, I would just place 1 in each cell, but I don't have a greenhouse, so space is limited, so I want to make sure that every single one of my cells has a plant that's going to succeed. So that's why I use 2 plants, or 2 seeds per cell. So what we'll do is we just take a little bit of seed, we put it in our hand. You take 1 seed, if I can pick it up, and just drop it into the hole. And then take another seed, drop it into the other hole, and now you can see both of our seeds there. And I take the larger end of my chopstick and I just compress down the soil, and bada bing, bada boom, we've got everything planted now. Now, I'm not going to keep you guys here while I plant everything else, but that's the process of what I do. Once I have everything planted, then what I'll do is I'll come back with just a water spray bottle. I'll spray this again just to make sure that the soil is adequately damp. And then I will place this into my office, which is where I have kind of my setup. I just use basically a shelving unit. And the first thing I do is I use a heating pad. I put that down and then I put the tray right on top of it. The heating pad is a big tip that I learned about 5 years ago. It does improve your germination, both the success rate, and it also speeds up the germination, because most of us in your house, if your ambient temperature is 68 to 69 degrees, this will raise the temperature of that soil by about 4 to 5 degrees, which will promote the plants, especially these warm, heat-loving plants, to grow faster. And depending on what you're planting, it can be anywhere from 4 days all the way up to 21 days before you start to see action from your seeds. So don't get discouraged if you start to see some things sprouting in about 4 or 5 days and the rest is vacant. Just give it some more time. On average, most of my peppers, most of my tomatoes usually I'll see kind of sprouting at about 7 days, while my peppers are usually slower. Usually I see my peppers at about 12 to 14 days. But if you're starting, broccoli, kale, cauliflower, something like that, usually I'll see those after about 3 or 4 days. So, now is just the time where you just watch and wait. Make sure that you've got some water in the base of the tray. And if you start to see the top of the soil dry out, be sure to reapply some water so that you keep this a nice humid, moist, damp soil. And well, that's all the time we have today, folks. I'm Daniel. Thanks for tuning into my channel, where I like to talk about history, culture, gardening, and other things that I find fascinating. If you enjoyed this, be sure to tune in again and subscribe, because we will share more about how my plants are doing and other updates in the garden. And we'll also be talking other things that we find enjoyable. So until then, we'll see you next time.